Hi there and good evening. Welcome to the Jim Bohannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, you'll find us at JimBohannonShow.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo Talks. We're at that phase of the Senate impeachment trial of President Trump that we have on the schedule. One more day of questioning of the various impeachment managers or defense team. And then after that, some key votes, more about which in a moment. And Karen Kafa has the latest from Washington.
All 100 senators have an opportunity to ask questions, but it is a handful of Republicans in particular that are getting a lot of attention. Senators like Mitt Romney of Utah, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, they are being eyed as potential votes that could make the difference between calling witnesses or this trial wrapping up relatively quickly.
A more visible Chief Justice.
The Senate will convene.
John Roberts, now the voice of senators, as he reads their questions over a 16-hour period.
This is a question for the counsel for the president. Senator Feinstein asks the House managers. The senators ask.
House managers and the president's defense lawyers answering those questions and trying to push their cases. The defense saying there's no wrongdoing on behalf of the president and that the House managers have a weak case.
There isn't any legitimate public interest. And they've totally failed to make that case.
The Democrats doing all they can to convince at least four Republican senators to vote yes on witnesses, such as John Bolton, the former national security advisor.
To turn him away, to look the other way, I think is deeply at odds with being an impartial juror.
Each answer allowed approximately 5 minutes.
To the president's counsel.
And the questions coming from one or multiple senators.
On my behalf and also joined by Senators Loeffler, Lee, Kramer, and McSally.
But after the 2-day round of questions is finished, the senators and perhaps Roberts will finally have to confront a likely difficult vote on whether to call witnesses.
And the timeline that's expected here is questions through tomorrow, setting up that debate over the witnesses on Friday. And you can see from the questions the senators have been asking just how they plan to use this question time. Democrats asking a lot of questions that prompt answers that point to the importance of witnesses, while Republicans asking a lot of questions that elicit answers that indicate they want to see this trial wrap up relatively quickly. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
And there's some interesting news to report this evening, only a day after Mitch McConnell was saying that he apparently didn't have the votes to block witnesses. Now we are hearing from a variety of senators that not only does McConnell feel that he has the votes to block witnesses, but also to, in essence, call the question. That is to say, to have a vote on acquittal or conviction. And this could all happen by Friday. This, according to The Hill, in its reportings, quoting such senators as Mike Rounds of South Dakota and let's see here, Mike Braun of Indiana, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, among others. They all sound pretty optimistic that at this stage of the game they apparently feel that McConnell may have more than, say, a one-vote margin so that a senator could change his or her mind and this could still proceed to a rapid conclusion. Senators are not entirely predictable beings. Former Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott had a good reason to name his autobiography Herding Cats, but nonetheless, we'll see. We're talking with Dr. Nathaniel Cogley. He's the head of the Department of Government, Legal Studies, and Philosophy at Tarleton State University in Stephenville, Texas, who joins us this evening. And thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me back, Jim. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Indeed. Your thoughts over the latest here, if in fact McConnell has rounded up the votes?
Well, he says he does, or at least that's the reports coming out. It's such a close vote because Republicans have 53 senators, and we've looked at a number who are very close on this, or have been back and forth. And the audio we just heard mentioned Romney, Collins, Murkowski. Well, there's three right there. So if McConnell thinks he has the votes and he has one of them, just looking at the questions that were asked tonight, it might be Murkowski. She was asking questions that would help her get to a not guilty vote. She talked about what if there's mixed motives? What if the president wants an investigation that's both in the national interest and happens to benefit him personally? That's a good line of questions for her to get away from trying to vote guilty here. And a lot of this uproar about whether or not John Bolton's going to testify, John Bolton seems to be presenting himself, or at least in this manuscript, as a relevant question on whether or not the allegations against the president are true. But there's a secondary question that the prosecuting side has to make the case for. If even the allegations are true, do they justify conviction and removal from office? And that's a totally different line of questioning. And there's another weakness in the prosecution's case, whether or not, the president, wanted to have these investigations before releasing the funds is different than whether or not that's a crime that justifies conviction and removal. We have a treaty with Ukraine on assistance in legal matters. Section 684 of the Impoundment Control Act lets them temporarily defer funds within the fiscal year. So the House has a tough time making both of those points.
And interesting that you mentioned Murkowski, since these reports also indicate there was a meeting this past day between Mitch McConnell and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. 1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, with Dr. Nathaniel Cogley of Tarleton State University. And we have a call from Kim in Shields, Michigan. And Kim, good evening.
Good evening, Jim, and your guest. I just wanted to tell you, I found out a lot of stuff on my phone on Fox News. There's going to be a bunch of stuff hitting the fan. They discovered a bunch of old videos, and Trump announced that game over. These old Bolton videos, the one from August of 2019 when he was speaking with Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty Clip, Bolton made no mention of any illicit pro quo and acknowledged, as Republicans had claimed, that they were combating corruption in the Ukraine. And it was a high priority for the Trump administration. And Bolton also called Trump's interview with Ukraine's leader cordial, with no mention of any misconduct. That was in just this last August. And they've uncovered a whole bunch of videos, old ones, like 10, 15 years ago, where Schiff calls Bolton, in regards to weapons of mass destruction and stuff, he said that Bolton is damaged goods, that Bolton bullies, marginalizes, and undermines those who disagree with him. And Schiff is also quoted as saying that he has serious issues, and would we want someone like with Bolton's lack of credibility? And Bolton himself has, this is a really interesting quote.
Uh-huh.
Bolton was quoted in Fox Business in 2010 as saying that he would be more than willing to lie if he felt it was in the nation's best interest. And he'd say something he knew was false. Yes, he would do that. And it just goes on and on.
Well, it apparently does indeed. Interesting information, of which I had not heard all of that. But suffice it to say that neoconservatives are not particularly beloved in the Democratic Party, nor in some of the more isolationist ranks of the Republican Party either. So, for what it's worth, I don't know, Dr. Cogley, I'll toss it at you.
Well, there's a bunch of video of people being inconsistent. We have a lot of video. A lot of these politicians were in office back during the Clinton trial, and they were saying the opposite of what they're saying now on both sides. So we have video of people being inconsistent. This would be video of Bolton when he was still part of the administration saying, the president's doing the right thing with Ukraine and approaching it in the right way and concerned about corruption. One thing, Jim, from this original New York Times article that kind of broke the manuscript is there's some vague language in there that as people have cited that article, we've moved away from that language. So in this New York Times article, it says that Bolton heard an answer from Trump that Trump preferred sending no assistance to Ukraine until officials had turned over all material they had about the Russia investigation. Continue on. So number one, he indicates he may have heard a preference. Well, Trump prefers that we end the filibuster in the Senate. It doesn't mean that that's an actual policy of the Trump administration. And the other key word there is Russia investigation. If you remember remember from the phone call with Zelensky, there's requests for two investigations. One is the activities of the Bidens with Burisma from 2014 to 2016, but the other is the CrowdStrike server over last election, and the claim that Russia interfered in the election and the server that helped them reach that conclusion. That's different. And the other language here talks about a Democrat or political rivals, which could be Hillary Clinton in 2016. And a lot of the articles citing the New York Times automatically assume this is about the Bidens.
Yeah, and so in other words, it would be helpful if we knew much more precisely about just what we were talking about here. All right, stay with us. More to come as we look at what could be some rapidly changing developments here. Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, our guest from Tarleton State University in Stephenville, Texas. He is the head of their Department of Government, Legal Studies, and Philosophy. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, and we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show, 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, as it now appears possible by the nose counting of Mitch McConnell, who has a pretty reliable counter on most occasions, that he thinks he's got the vote to wrap everything up on Friday, both the question of whether there would be witnesses, namely none, and then the actual object of the entire trial, that is to say, a vote on whether or not the president is to be convicted and removed from office or acquitted. Our guest is Dr. Nathaniel Cogley. He heads up the Department of Government at Tarleton State University, and looking at where we stand, the arguments that you've heard back and forth now. We've had, of course, the presentations of the various teams, the House impeachment managers and the president's defense team, and we've had a day of questioning. In terms of well, let's say they were all in a classroom of yours, and you were handing out grades. What would you give the respective sides?
Well, I've always thought the contrast between the two teams is pretty stark. The House managers are themselves politicians who are up for re-election in a home district, and they're on national television. Their natural inclination is to play to the home district. We heard a lot of things from them that is not designed to convince senators to vote a certain way, but is designed to help script a narrative that's good for them. We heard Jerry Nadler called the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 the Anti-Impoundment Act of 1974. We also heard Jerry Nadler say that if any senator votes against the witnesses they want, they're complicit in Trump's cover-up. That's not designed to win over senators. We also heard Adam Schiff say, House managers are going to present their case, President's counsel present their case, we'll have the questioning, and then the trial will begin. In other words, he's suggesting that the trial doesn't begin until they're witnesses. The Democrats have very much tried to control the narrative of the president's motives and actions. And right now, when I hear from their side, I hear that they're trying to control the narrative for when they lose this case. In other words, they're going to say it wasn't a fair trial, it wasn't a real trial, we didn't get the witnesses we want. The president's team is a professional team designed to win the case efficiently. They're not up for election, and they're not playing to their home district.
Certainly a very interesting point that you make. Indeed, I have said that from the beginning of this entire process in the committee hearings that occurred over on the House side, that a lot of members were simply collecting the tape necessary to make campaign commercials for their reelection. So an interesting point that has been brought forward. How would you compare this trial with what happened regarding Bill Clinton 20 years ago, in which, of course, he was ultimately acquitted?
Well, I would say the accusation is closer to the Johnson trial. That was a trial over whether or not the president can do his job. Johnson was impeached for firing one of his members of his cabinet. Trump is being impeached for making decisions that presidents are allowed to make. They're just questioning his motives for those decisions. So the charges are more similar to the Johnson case, but the format that we're using for the trial is very much the Clinton case. There may have been some Republicans that wanted to dismiss outright, but because there's enough Republicans from very close swing states, it's not good politics for them to dismiss quickly and to throw out on summary judgment. What's good politics for them is to be patient, let the House managers make their case, let the president's counsel make their case, and then vote not guilty after going through this process. But this has been hard for the senators. They have to sit there. They have to be quiet, no cell phone. They have to listen to talking points from, partisan House